You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. So we also learned, or at least it's being leaked today, not confirmed yet by ESPN, but being leaked that LSU and Florida State will have Joe Tessitore, Greg McElroy, and Katie George on the call from the Superdome on that Sunday before Labor Day. LSU and Florida State have played 9 times. Tigers are 2-7. The last time they played was in 1991. I actually remember that game. Todd Kinchin scored on the first possession of the game. Tigers actually forced a turnover. They led 10-0, but Florida State was just in its heyday back then and ultimately stormed back and beat LSU 27-16 in Death Valley. So it'll be that's such an important way to start the season for Brian Kelly. I was really deep diving into the schedule because I did an interview this morning on a radio station in Huntsville. Drew Diarman, Scott Thyssen do a really good job, and they were kind enough to have me on to talk LSU, and we were talking a little bit about the schedule, and at Media Days, if y'all listen to any of our coverage, one of the really gigantic questions and big takeaways from Media Day was that there was just not a consensus on, after Bama, Georgia, who's next. There's just no consensus. And Drew Diarman, one of the hosts, said in the interview that he thinks LSU will end up being the second-place team in the West behind Alabama. And his contention is, look, it's still LSU. LSU's always had talent, and the issue at LSU has been coaching. And there's still a lot of talent on this roster. And in a year where there's a lot of sort of ambiguity and uncertainty around the conference and doesn't seem to be a clear-cut second-place team behind Bama in the West, LSU, with a really good coach and a talented roster, is as good a pick as any to be that. So it's a compelling argument. By the way, happy Texas A&M Day. It's August the 4th. That's 8-4. So congrats to the Aggies on their day. We wish them well. But I do look at the schedule for LSU, and I think it's just so important that LSU gets off to a good start. And if I look at this schedule and I break it down into 3 4-game sets, you got to start 4-0. You just have to start 4-0. That includes beating Florida State, then you play Southern, of course. You're home against Mississippi State, which you have to win, and then you're home against New Mexico, which of course you'll win. And I look at LSU, that it's so much success for so long in season openers. It was almost a given. And it wasn't like they were opening up with layups. I mean, they lost the 0-2 season opener at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg in 2002. And then from 2003 through 2015, they didn't lose an opener. Of course, they lost the 2016 opener in Lambeau against Wisconsin. And in that stretch of 13 consecutive season opening wins, it wasn't like you played a bunch of chumps. In 2004, you opened up at home against Oregon State and Derek Anderson, who became an NFL quarterback. In 2005, the Katrina year, you went to Arizona State, on a weird week, as we all know, everything that was going on post-Katrina. In 2007, you opened up with a road game on Thursday night in conference at Mississippi State. And that was a game where they felt like they had something. Remember Sylvester Croom's line, you ever been bear hunting with a stick? Well, now we got a gun. And that was his line before that game. They got blown out. Was it 45-7, 45-0, whatever it was? 2009, you went on the road and opened up at Washington. A year later, you opened up in Atlanta against North Carolina. After that, you opened up on the road at Jerry World against number 3 Oregon. I mean, you had TCU in 2013, Wisconsin and Houston in 2014, a game you damn near lost. 2015, remember your opener against McNeese got canceled, so your first game was actually at Mississippi State. I mean, you've had some really tough opening games in that stretch. You won them all. But you're 3-3 in your last 6. You lost to Wisconsin. In 2020, you lost to Mississippi State in the COVID year at home. And last year you lost at UCLA in the Rose Bowl. It hasn't gone great in these openers. I like LSU in the Florida State game, like we've talked about, a de facto home game for the Tigers. I know Florida State has said they sold out their 30,000 ticket allotment. There's a lot of LSU fans who have said they actually went on the Florida State website to buy their tickets, which makes a ton of sense. Florida State's coming off, back-to-back sub-500 seasons. They haven't had a winning regular season since 2016. So I could get why maybe Florida State fans aren't completely jazzed about this, making the trip. But LSU just has to start fast. You got to beat Florida State, and you got to beat Mississippi State to start 4-0. If you do, then you look at the next quadrant, those next 4 games, and that's where I think your season is kind of made. After those first 4 against Florida State, Southern, Mississippi State, and New Mexico, then you're looking at a 4-game stretch that includes at Auburn, home against Tennessee, at Florida, and home against Ole Miss. That 4-game stretch right there from October 1st, October the 22nd. Paul, pull this up, please. That kind of makes your season. Because if you start 4-0, what you do in those 4 games determines what you're playing for in November. Because if you start 4-0, and then you go 2-2 in that stretch, at Auburn, home against Tennessee, at Florida, and then Ole Miss. If you go 2-2 in that stretch, you're 6-2. Well, you assume a loss to Alabama. Now your ceiling, as I've talked about, is 9-3, but you're going to have to win at Arkansas and win at A&M. The way I kind of look at this is I think the more I look at LSU's schedule, I do think they start 4-0. I think they take care of business against Florida State and at home against Mississippi State. I think they go 2-2 in that next stretch. The at Auburn, home against Tennessee, at Florida, home against Ole Miss. Probably win one, lose one, win one, lose one. Maybe 1-1 at home, 1-1 on the road. And then I think you're going to lose to Alabama. I think you'll beat UAB, and you probably split the Arkansas and Texas A&M games, and you go 8-4. I mean, I think that's probably how I see it playing out the more I look at it. But boy, there's just such a case that could be made for having the boom season or the bust season. I just tend to believe Brian Kelly's too good of a coach. The talent's too good to see LSU bottom out. Last year, guys, LSU had 10 players drafted off of last year's team. That team going 6-6 was completely unconscionable. It's why Ed Orgeron's fired. It was way too talented of a football team to be 6-6. So you've still got some talent for sure, and you've got a much better coaching staff. So I don't see the bottoming out like some are predicting. But it's really hard with so many questions against that schedule to predict that the 10-win type season, which is why I keep finding myself settling somewhere realistically around 8-4. But that is so predicated on getting off to a good start, beating Florida State and winning that home game against Mississippi State. You got to start 4-0. Because if you don't, then the scenario that some are talking about where, last week we talked about how Vegas has their raw number at 5.5. Like, now you're talking about that making sense if you drop either one of those games against Florida State or Mississippi State in that first month. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.